What's up, gamers? Welcome back to another episode of the Meta Update. My name is Joshua Joji Howard, and of course, as usual, we're going to be going over the games and the stuff that happened over this last weekend. So let's go ahead and get right into it. It was not a good weekend for the guard this time around. It was a larger than average week. We had like the low 60s number of players by my count. Of course, my numbers, as always, are going to be a little bit different than some of the other stats aggregators because I don't really care how many players were at the event. As long as it was 5 rounds, then we were going to be including you. Most of the top players that we had were at teams events this weekend. Yeah, I mean, Nassim, Gaylord, Wesley St. Hines were all at the same event, BFS, and then we had a bunch of other players you would expect to potentially be podium players at different teams events across the world. Gustavo was also at another teams event over in Europe. That said, we did have a couple surprise players making podiums, so we will be giving them some shoutouts in today's video. But even though this looks pretty bad, like, it's okay, guys. Like, guard is still really, really good. There's still a lot of things we can do. Um, it was a slightly lower average elo than usual. Typically, we've been seeing things like the 1540s, maybe low 1550s, but the median is also relatively low. We also had a lot of players going to their first event this weekend, which is very cool. So, welcome to the community. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into it. We actually have a fair number of lists to go over today, unlike last week where we had 3 of the same list. To start off with, we're going to be going over my favorite archetype in guard, which is Doombolt guard. Again, if you haven't watched my video on how to play Doombolt guard, really recommend you go do that. There are several other variations of how to play it, but the whole thing is, I realized this talking to one of my buddies. Doombolt guard is an aggressive mid-range deck. You're just like, if you've ever played any TCGs, you're just using more efficient units than your opponent generally has, and just kind of swamping them in a couple of different waves, and then you end with a couple of like really, really big pushes with things like your Rogel Dorns towards the end of the game. You can also play it in a very aggressive style, but regardless, the core things that makes it Doombolt is the number of mortal wounds it does between Kazarkin, Krieg Engineers, and some variations like taking Nork as well. Anyway, the first one we have a new player who I haven't seen before, Dean Lees, going 5-0 at NSGRC with my exact list that I recommended from the video. Cadian Castellan, 1 Cadian Command Squad, 2 Sun Command Squads, Nork Deadog, 2 Rogel Commanders, 20 Cadians, 2 units of 10 Krieg, 2 Chimeras, 3 Kazarkin, 3 units of 5 Krieg Engineers, and 2 units of 5 Scions. Now this event was a little bit unusual. Partly, like looking at it, there were not that many super strong players going to this event, but it was also just a lot of players that I haven't seen before. So it was a little bit surprising. I believe this was in Wales, if I remember correctly. There was definitely an event in Wales, but congratulations to Dean on winning winning the GT that they went to. They beat Imperial Fist, Space Wolves, Custodes, Eldar, and Grey Knights along the way. Moving on, we have a very similar list coming out from, not very similar, but fairly similar list coming out from Travis Morton over at the BFS Team Championship, where we will have several players from that event showing up in today's recap. Travis Martin went 3 wins and 2 draws. He had a Cadian Command Squad, no Castellan, 3 units of Scion Command Squads, 2 Royal Commanders, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 2 units of 10 Krieg, 2 Chimeras, 1 Torox, 3 units of Kazarkin, 2 units of 5 Krieg Engineers, and 3 units of 5 Scions. So basically, you take away the Castellan and um, what else? Oh, and like 1 unit of Krieg Engineers, and you add in a Torox and an extra San Command Squad. So it has a little bit more dynamicism to it, but it does lose out on a little bit of having one of those big hammers in the cast and break. Other than that, though, you'd have to play this a little bit more aggressively because you're using the signs to go kill things. They are spending a lot of points on the amount of damage that they do, so you do have to use that rather effectively. Travis ended up getting a big win into Demons, a draw into Sisters, a small win into Ultras, a draw into Thousand Suns, and then a big win into Thousand Suns. So well done overall to Travis. Moving on, at the same event, we have Andreas Hoffman, who, I forgot to update his scores. He did not have a great event overall. We have seen Andreas have a much better week a couple of weeks ago where they were playing at 8TC, but this time when they were playing at BFS, a little bit of a weaker event overall. They were playing very similar. This is one of the 2 variations that I've talked about in the list that I recommended to people. It's a Cadian Castellan, Cadian Command Squad, 2 Silent Command Squads, and Ogrim Bodyguard. So you downgrade Nork to an Ogrim Bodyguard. You do 2 Rogel Dorn Commanders, 20 Cadians, 10 Krieg. Instead of the second unit of Krieg, they upgrade it to a third Chimera, 3 units of Kazarkin, 3 units of 5 Krieg Engineers, and 2 units of 5 Scions. I have this up on my other screen, but Andreas ended up beating Ultramarines, a small win there, a small loss into Imperial Knights, small loss into Orcs, a larger loss into Thousand Suns, and a small loss into Tyranids. So for whatever reason, Andreas just was not vibing with this version of the list nearly as much as the previous version, or the previous thing that they took a couple of weeks ago. There we go. Perfect. Moving over to Europe, we do have Gustavo Jose Bronco Verandas de Sousa himself, going 5-0 actually, with the one Dorn variant that he always likes to play and has been very popular over in Europe. He was playing one Keating Castellan, a Keating Command Squad, 3 Scion Command Squads, Nork Deadhog, 1 Ogren Bodyguard, a Rogel Dorn Commander, 1 unit of 20 Cadians, 1 unit of 10 Krieg, 3 Chimeras, 3 Kazarkin, 2. Was it only 2? 2 units of 5 Krieg Engineers. It might have been 3. I'd have to double check, but at least 2 units of Krieg Engineers, 2 units of 5 Scions, and 1 unit of 10 Scions. And as I have said many, many times, one of the big leaps in order to play this list, if you're trying to play this yourself, is Nork Deadhog is going to attach to the Scion Command Squad and the 10 Scions most of the time. It is important that you have this unit of 10 Scions take volley guns instead of melta guns if you're trying to recreate the success with this list, and that unit is going to start on the board. And the big thing that you have to do with it is you need to dump CP into it, right? You're probably going to snap to it, you might grenade, you're probably going to Morty and Minute for the +1 strength, and you might pop the lethals as well. You might even pop the ignores cover. So it's not ridiculous to want to spend 2, 3, 4, or even 5 command points on this unit all in one turn. And then it'll kill kind of whatever. Like, you will do a lot of damage to everything in the game. It's pretty cool. Anyway, Gustavo ended up getting... He only played against 2 list archetypes. He got a 20, a 19, and a 20 into Tau on their board choice, and then you got a 15 and a 20 into the Triple Land Raider Custodes. So really good stuff over to Gustavo. It was a smaller version of Pyra than the one that we've seen before, where they have a lot of national teams, but Gustavo really tearing it up there. Okay, moving on, we're going to be going over to the other strongest and arguably even stronger archetype for Guard being played right now, which is Recon Guard. And these are all of Wesley's hordes. You just have a ton of infantry that has a lot of OC. It's very difficult to remove because it has cover and double cover, and you've got a lot of reactive strats that you can use to make sure your opponent basically has no play in the game at all. To start off with, we have Jawad Salah, Jawad aka Jay Salah, getting 3rd place overall at the Anzac Cup, going 4-1. He was playing 3 Keating Castellans, 3 Keating Command Squads, a Commissar at Gonskos, and Ursula Creed. So notably the extra Castellan there, and that means that you have 3 units of 20 Cadians, 1 unit of 20 Catachan, 1 unit of 10 Catachan, 5 units of 10 Krieg, 2 units of 10 Rough Riders, 1 unit of Kazarkin, 3 units of Krieg Engineers, and a Cyclops. Now, one of the really interesting things about this list, of course, is you have like this extra Cadian leader that you're oftentimes going to have. Typically, in a lot of recon lists, you will always start with the 3 units of 20 Cadians and the 3 command squads, and 2 of them will have Castellans. And then typically you're making a choice because Ursula Creed is typically going to go with one of the command squads, so you have the extra orders that are going to be at range. And then if you have the extra Castellan, it will oftentimes go with a 4th unit of 20 Cadians. However, Jay's list only has 3 units of 20 Cadians, which give you a couple of interesting options. One, you have the 3 Keating Castellan bricks, which have a lot of damage, right? That is the most damage that you can put into a unit, the most combat potential that you can put into those units without putting Ogre Bodyguards in them. Ursula Creed, hitting on 3s does make up for sustained, but it does not make your Overwatch better, and then that unit cannot fall back and shoot. However, the options that you have is you're basically never going to attach the Castellan or Ursula Creed to the Kazarkin. Like, you could do it, but it's not really something you're going to do unless you're worried about indirect. And then Ursula Creed can run around by herself. So you have a couple of options to make here. The one other interesting thing that we have in this list is the one Cyclops, and the Cyclops is really fun anti-surge tech. So basically what you can do is once you've gotten out your opponent's reactive moves, you move the Cyclops just outside of where it's going to explode, and you make sure that that is the closest thing to the opposing unit, such that when when you trigger Surge up against, like, World Leaders or Huron's Marauders, when they surge, you're trying to make sure that the Cyclops is the closest thing to the enemy unit, so that when that happens, when they go into the Cyclops dies off of the surge move, and then you can still shoot that unit. So it's a cool little tech. You are going to be losing the reroll ones off the Scout Sentinel, but it does create a different dynamic into some of these armies that you can play against. Moving over to the, what would I call this? Mountain time zone? Great Plains? Mountain time zone? Yeah. There's a big mountain range in the middle of the United States, and this is in the mountain time zone. We have Andre Gorin going 4-1. It is worth noting that where Jawad ended up losing in the final round, and so therefore he was playing against one of the toughest opponents. Andre losing in the first round does mean that he has a little bit easier opponents going out through the rest of his rounds because he does have that first loss. But anyway, Andre also playing a variant of Recon Guard. He's got 2 Kading Castellans, 3 Kading Command Squads, Guns Ghost, a Krieg Command Squad, Nork Deadlock, 2 Ogryn Bodyguards, Slime Marbo, Ursula Creed, 3 units of 20 Cadians, 1 unit of 20 Catachan, 1 unit of 10 Catachan, 4 units of 10 Krieg, 2 units of 10 Rough Riders, 3 units of Krieg Engineers, and a Cyclops. Now, there's a couple changes in here that I'm a little bit surprised about. One, the Krieg Command Squad. I don't really rate this data sheet very highly at all. It just doesn't have a medic, and you could attach a 2 unit of 10 Krieg in order to get like some cute interactions there, whereas like they can't be they basically can't be battle shocked because they can still use strats. They still have OC, I think, and you can still give them orders or some combination of that. But I think this could probably have just been another unit of 10 Krieg. Maybe he doesn't have it. I don't know exactly what happened there. And then Sly Marbo is another interesting piece that you have in this list because it does have that lone up. And there's some cool things that you can do. And Sly Marbo, back when you could Overwatch and then move afterwards, I thought was a really interesting piece in Recon. Now that you can't do that anymore, it's like okay. So it makes me wonder if there were some really open boards that Andre was playing on. But other than that, you got a lot of the other normal stuff. You have the 2 Cadian Castellans and Ursula Creed, which are going to be going with the 3 Cadian bricks. But I feel like the Creed Command Squad, Sly Marbo, and Nork are like kind of odd, like slightly odd inclusions overall. And then he also has the Cyclops as well, for a similar thing to what we saw with Jay. Moving across to the Eastern United States, we have Wesley St. Hines, Nemo the Fish himself, going 5-0, getting 5 straight 20 zeros in a row at BFS Team Championships. He's got 2 Kading Castellans, 3 Kading Command Squads, 1 Commissar, Gaunt's Ghost, 3 Ogryn Bodyguards, Sly Marbo in this version as well, Ursula Creed, 3 units of 20 Cadians, 1 unit of 20 Catachan, 1 unit of 20 Krieg, 4 more units of 10 Krieg, 1 unit of 10 Rough Riders, 2 units of 5 Rough Riders, 3 Krieg Engineers, and a Scout Sentinel. So it is a little bit interesting to me to see, because Wesley St. Hines will recommend or take very slightly different versions of Recon to different events. One of the things that he has said in the past is in team events he's more likely to bring more bricks of 20s than he is for singles, whereas because if he's going to be taking these 20 bricks, he's expecting to get a little bit of pairing resources where he can just go run over certain things that can't deal with those 20 bricks, whereas in singles he's oftentimes going to take a couple extra units that will give him a little bit more freedom, right? Like the variant that I played was just something that I stole from Nemo, where I just had the unit of 10 Kazarkin that could deal with like submarines here and there. Whereas this version that Wesley is playing doesn't have it. Instead, he's got like Sly Marbo and the 1 unit of 10 Krieg between a unit of 20 Krieg. So there's still a lot of opportunities to do slightly different things with all of these versions of Recon overall. Anyway, going 20-0 to CSM, Emperor's Children, Tau, and Knights. So very cool stuff. Moving across. Ooh, I don't remember where this one was, but Battle at the Base, we have Ben Eisenhoff going 4 wins and 1 draw. Slightly different take on Recon overall, but you still have all of the core pieces. You have 2 Kading Castellans with tripwires and survival gear. One of the important things to note about survival gear, which is the scout enhancement, is it only gives the character. It only gives the bearer scout, so it doesn't actually do anything in this list. It's not going to be giving one of the Cadian unit scout because they are not the bearer. They are not the character. I have 3 Cadian command squads, Gaunt's Ghost, 2 Ogryn Bodyguards, Ursula Creed, 3 Cadian bricks, 1 Catachan brick, 5 units of 10 Krieg, 2 units of 10 Rough Riders, 1 unit of 5 Death Riders, 3 units of 5 Krieg Engineers, 1 unit of Rattlings, and a Scout Sentinel. This is very similar to the list that I took to my GT, but differences between the lists where I didn't have either of these enhancements, and I didn't have the unit of Death Riders or the unit of Rattling. So I think that's like 135 points. Instead, I had a unit of Kazarkin. And where did the other points get spent? Oh, and another Ogryn Bodyguard. So, pretty good stuff overall. Ben ends up getting a big win into Drukhari, a draw into Necrons, medium win into Tau, a big win into Tau, and a small win into Custodes. So, well done on the 4, 0, and 1. Moving on, we're going back to some more traditional things that we are used to seeing in the Guard. The first one is 2 Dorns and 2 or more Vanquishers. This is pretty standard stuff. You have a lot of firepower, and then you generally surround it with either Kazarkin and transports or really cheap units like horses and or Krieg engineers, or to take space, move your opponent's units into the open so that you can shoot them with your mini guns. And the first one that we have, and the only one in this category, we have Jerome Connolly, one of the players who I have seen more times in top placements than almost anyone else. He's been having a very good last year, going 4 and 1 at the South Coast Super Major. One of the important things, again, because he lost in an earlier round, he had a couple of easier opponents in the next subsequent rounds. But Jerome ended up having a Keating command squad, a commissar, 1 Scion command squad, 2 Royal Dorn commanders, 1 unit 10 Cadians, 1 unit 10 Catachin, 2 units of 10 Krieg, 2 Chimeras, 2 units of 5 Death Riders, 3 units of Kazarkin, 1 unit of 5 Scions, and 2 Lehman Russ Vanquishers. Pretty standard stuff overall, kind of a blend of the two things we were talking about, right? With a mixture of Kazarkin and Chimeras and a couple of cheap units in the Death Riders. By not taking the third Chimera, you are able to get a little bit more stuff to play in the midboard. But Jerome ended up beating Blood Angels before losing to Necrons, before beating World Eaters, Grey Knights, and Imperial Knights to close out, going 4-1 yet again. Moving on, we have another classic, 2 Dorns and 12 or more bullgryn. Similar thing to the Vanquishers, except you're using the bullgryn to like bully the middle of the board. You're going to put them typically somewhere between your natural and the middle, and you're going to then, after that, start marching them towards your opponent's home objective and hope that your opponent can't really deal with them. The first one that we have is a player that I have not seen before, Daniel Jessamine Perot, going 4 and 1 at Fool's Errand. We have a Cadian command squad, a commissar with Abhuman Detail, Scion command squad, 1 Rogal Dorn commander, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 2 Chimeras, 2 units of 5 Rough Riders, 2 units of 6 Bullgryn, 2 units of Kazarkin, 3 units of 5 Krieg Engineers, 1 unit of 5 Scions, and a Rogal Dorn battle tank. Now, I have heard some people describe this as Doombolt, but with Bullgryn. And this doesn't really play the same way as a lot of Doombolt lists, because you do have those 2 units of 6 Bullgryn, which are taking up a lot of points for stuff that you would normally have in the midboard, right? If we look at this, these Bullgryn are really eating up the fact that you no longer have the hammer unit in the Cadian Caston brick, and you don't have the second unit of Scions, and instead you're relying on having the Bullgryn kind of countercharge things that are dealing with the Krieg Engineers, but if your opponent is able to deal with those in shooting, sometimes those Bullgryn end up falling off a little bit. So I can see why some people would think that they end up playing similar, but they end up playing fairly differently overall. Daniel ended up getting a win into Ultras before losing into Death Guard, so the next couple of opponents were not as difficult. He ended up playing against Thousand Suns, Salamanders, and Blood Angels to go 4-1 overall. First time I've seen Daniel in the list reviews, so welcome to the Guard. Next, this one was a bit of a weird one, but I'm going to give him a shout out right now because, I know him, cool dude, and I know he would appreciate being in these videos because I know he watches them. We had Anthony LaMonica at April Showers, so this was a small event. It's kind of a GT. I was actually originally planning to go to this event, but it ended up not being a very large event, and I had a birthday party to go to instead, so I did that. And so I did not update his things. There it is. Anthony. Okay. So Anthony ended up having a Cadian command squad, a commissar with Abhuman Detail, Gaunt's Ghost, 2 Royal Dorn commanders, an Engine Seer, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 2 Chimeras, 1 unit of 10 Rough Riders, 2 units of 6 Bullgryn, 2 units of Kazarkin, 3 units of Krieg Engineers. So this is as far as Bullgryn lists go, this is a very static one because you don't have any of those Scions that are going to be moving around the board or dropping in different places. You have the Gaunt's Ghost, which are kind of interesting and do a similar thing, but because there's only like the 2 chimeras and like 1 unit of 10 rough riders, it ends up being a relatively static form of play, which can mean that it has a very brittle game plan. Where if you hit the things that you can beat, it's very, very good. But if you start running into things that are too dynamic and can run around in ways that you can't really answer, it can end up breaking down a little bit towards the end. But Anthony ended up getting, from what I understand, at least 2 pair downs throughout the course of this event, because he ended up beating Tyranids, Admech, Necrons, and then Tau in the 4th round. And then he didn't play the 5th round because he was the only undefeated, and I don't know exactly what happened, but I wanted to give him a shout out because it's not his fault that the event wasn't very large, and he did go 4-0 at it, so he was at least going to go 4-1 no matter what else happened. So anyway, well done to Anthony, and I think this is the first time I've definitely seen your name pop up quite a bit before, but I think this is the first time I've seen you go X and 1. So congratulations on the podium placement. Boom. All right. Next, we only have a couple more lists. We're going to start off with Pile of Tanks. These are, again, lists that end up using a lot of vehicles, and the major thing that you have to do is you have to play them relatively aggressively, and you also have to know how to use your vehicles as melee units. You have to be charging your Hellhounds and Vanquishers into things. You have to be charging a lot of your tanks in order to get movement off of them. The first one that we have is going to be David Gaylord, who went 4-1 at BFS with his Hammer of the Emperor. It's a bit of an interesting list. It's Gaunt's Ghost, a Lord Solar, Rogel Dorn Commander with Indomitable Steeds, that's the 6-up Feel No Pain, a Rogel Dorn Commander with the Veteran Crews, that's the reroll 1s, 1 Engine Seer, 1 Hellhound, a Luminous Exterminator, 3 Luminous Vanquishers, 1 Rogaldorn Battle Tank, and 2 Scout Sentinels. He ended up getting a 20 into World Leaders, a 15 into Votan, an 8-12 into Tau, which is pretty good for most things into Tau these days, a 20-0 into Death Guard, and a 17-3 into Custodes. If you want to know more about this, I would strongly recommend going to check out David Gaylord's video. He will probably do an event recap, but the other big thing is he did have an event recap where he ended up talking a little bit more about the list and BFS. So if you are interested in more of this, go ahead and check out 40K Fireside and watch some of the videos that they are putting out over there. A lot of good content and good stuff. David Gaylord, not surprised that they went 4-1, but it has been a little bit since we have seen David on the guard. So welcome back to the Astra Militarum. Hope you enjoyed your stay. Okay, lastly, we only have 1 or 2 more lists. These are just things that didn't fall into any of the other categories. And the only one that we have here is Peter Elias. Probably Peter Elias, going 3 wins, 1 loss, and 1 draw at Battle at the Base. It is a Cadian Command Squad, Commissar with Adpayment Tail, Lord Solar, 10 Cadians, 10 Catachan, 1 Torox, 1 unit of 5 Rough Riders, 6 Bullgryn, 1 unit of 5 Death Riders, 2 Field Ordnance Batteries, 1 unit of 5 Engineers, 2 units of Krieg Flamers, 1 unit of 5 Ratlings, 1 Leman Rush Demolisher, 2 Leman Rush Vanquishers, and 1 Rogaldorn Battle Tank. I'm not gonna lie, this list just looks kind of like a grab bag of like, I did that video not that long ago about like stuff that you can play in Grizzled Company, and this is basically like if you just kind of picked stuff at random between like the first 3 tiers. This is kind of what that looks like to me. I'm not really sure what this is targeting. I guess it's got, because you've got a lot of like damage 2 in this list, right? You've got the 2 units of Krieg Flamers. You've got the 2 Field Ordnance Batteries. So it's a lot of AP1 damage 2 that you're shooting out at long range. You have the Commissar who's going to be hanging out with the 6 Bullgryns, so that Lord Solar can hang out with the Cadian Command Squad and order all of the tanks. But then you also have like a lot of there's just like a lot of stuff in this list is kind of like the best way to describe it. Some of the big things about this list that you are going to have, if you were to try and copy this yourself, is you would have to figure out what are you going to be standing on the natural. I think the first thing is it's either going to be the Bullgryn brick, or maybe like one of the Vanquishers relatively early on, or the Demolisher. So they're just going to be going out and posing a problem for your opponent. But because it has so many different tools, and a lot of these tools are fairly slow, right? Between the Bullgryn, who can only move 6, the Krieg Flamers, who move 4 base, but can go move 7 with move. You have to be very careful about how you're deploying this. So really interesting stuff coming out from Peter overall. Getting a 20 into Dark Angels, a 10-10 into Necrons, a 20-0 into an Iron Hands Vanguard list, an 11-9 into Tau, and a 5-15 into Tau as well. Overall, we had we're mostly seeing a condensation into two primary styles of list, right? We have the Recon, which is becoming very popular, and then the Doombolt. I think if you are trying, again, if you're trying to play singles on your own, if you're looking for something to play, I would generally recommend this list that Dean Lee's played. I think it is very well rounded. I think you can play it on basically any terrain, and you're going to have reasonable success as long as you're not playing on like WTC heavy boards over and over again. But I know if you are trying to play like a little bit more heavy boards and you want to be a bit more free to attack things on like WTC, the list that Gustavo has been playing has also been seeing a lot of success, particularly in Europe. If you are a little bolder, you can also just take Wesley's list. But this is a list that is like, I don't think it's as hard to play as a lot of people make it out to be. It is not trivial. It's not trivially easy, but it's the kind of thing where if you have good fundamentals, you can probably just make this work. And then other than that, I think something like Jerome Conley, if you just want to play more tanks, it's going to be pretty good for most people. Anyway, that's all we have for today. We had a decent number of lists coming out for this one. How many is that? That is like 12, 15, something like that. Decent number of lists overall. Anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I will have something about Commissary Arc out coming either later today, maybe tomorrow. We'll find out. We'll see how much. We'll see how much I can actually cram into like one small day. Anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you guys all next time. Bye bye.